Welcome into the show, everyone. Christian Ojakjian here with Jordan Hill, who covers Georgia for Dogs 24/7. Thanks for being here with me, Jordan.
Yeah, Christian, happy to come back home for the second straight year and talk a little hoops.
So, year three for Mike White was a win, right? You get back in the tournament for the first time in 10 years, lose to one of the best eight seeds we've ever seen in Gonzaga, and, did that in a historically great SEC, finished strong, winning those last four to get in. You beat Florida. So, a lot to like about what you saw last year. Obviously, Asa Newell's in the draft now. You lost some pieces in the portal, but a lot of talent comes in. So, give me an overall reflection of kind of last season and how I guess this offseason went in building another roster.
Yeah, I mean, last year, I think around the Georgia program, people saw it as the opportunity to get back. They had not been to the NCAA tournament in a decade. They saw with Asa Newell coming in, a five-star, with the guys they had coming back, most notably Silas Demery Jr. and Blue Kane, they needed to take advantage and they needed to make the plays and win some big games over the course, especially of SEC play, to make the tournament. They had their ups and downs during that season, but like you said, closed strong. I mean, an incredible win over Florida at home was probably the win that helped get them into the tournament. Now, their run against Gonzaga didn't go very well. Gonzaga jumped on them pretty early there in Wichita, and it was pretty much over before we got to halftime. But no, I think they went into this offseason with some momentum. They did lose some big pieces. Asa going to the draft, Silas Demery Jr. transferring to UConn, some significant losses there. But I think they carried that momentum into portal season. They pick up five transfers, I think all of whom will play some pretty significant roles. Signed some talented high school guys, three guys with Jake Wilkins, Dominique Wilkins' son, being the big name among them. They're hoping to contend again this year. It's going to be a different looking team. I think you're going to see smaller lineups. I think you're going to see them try to push the pace more than they did last year. But I think they're hopeful. I think that they've got a lot of new pieces that have to hit the ground running and adjust to SEC play. But they're hoping they can make it back-to-back runs to the tournament and see what they can do with a very different looking lineup this year.
So, Kanan Catchings and Jeremiah Wilkinson are two guys that I want to start with. Let me go one at a time. But the reason I connect them is because one, I'm really high on them both after their freshman seasons, and two, they both are Georgia connected because Kanan Catchings played at overtime elite, right? And then Jeremiah Wilkinson is from Georgia. Let's start with Jeremiah Wilkinson. I don't know what his role exactly is on this team, but I watched him a lot down the stretch last year, and man, is he a really fun guard at 6'1", average 15 a game as a freshman. The efficiency is not good, but there wasn't a whole lot going on there, and they kind of just needed him and Stojakovic to just do what they could. But this dude had a couple 30-point games, and kind of coming back to Georgia and having more talent around him. What are expectations for Jeremiah Wilkinson this year?
I think he's got a lot of potential. We haven't had a chance to watch practice at this point when we're recording this, but we've talked to a few different players, and they've talked about Jeremiah Wilkinson being a guy that jumps out of the gym. I mean, a guy that's just like a highlight reel every time he's out there, and I think that's what Georgia wants him to be. And the way it's shaping up right now, I expect he's got a chance to be the starting two. Be that off-ball guard that can make plays and that can be counted on. And it was interesting. We have had a chance to talk to him, and he talked about the chance to come home to continue what Georgia did last year, to build on that NCAA tournament run. And he's a guy that has worked a lot on his passing this offseason. I think that they want to be able to trust him when he's out on the floor, because this is a team that, in talking to Mike White, he has said that he thinks they can do a better job taking care of the ball. He was very disappointed last year in their assist to turnover ratio. They really struggled when it came to turnovers, but I think they're really excited about Jeremiah Wilkinson. I think he's a guy that has that big play ability. And again, when we talk tempo, I see him as a guy that they want to just kind of turn loose. They know he's got a lot of potential to go out there and make plays, has a chance to be one of the top scorers. I think he was a pretty early addition, if I'm remembering right, in the portal for Georgia. I think they see him as a very valuable piece, a guy that can provide quite a bit this year.
I'm going to take a slight detour to Jordan Ross because I'm interested in the fact that you said taking care of the ball is a priority, and he was fantastic at that at St. Mary's, but St. Mary's also is so slow. So I don't know what it's like for Jordan Ross to go from a team that wants to play literally some of the slowest basketball in the country to one that wants to maybe run and gun and kind of throw a different look at some of these SEC teams as a more undersized lineup. He's also a 30% shooter from three. I think he only hit like 20 last year, so that's not really his game, but definitely a guy who can defend and control a game, facilitate and set guys up. So talk me through how Jordan Ross came to Georgia from St. Mary's, because that feels like kind of a random acquisition.
I'm fascinated to see once the season gets started. It might be something that goes into the season. This battle for the starting point guard position between Jordan Ross and between Smurf Millender, who they got from UTSA. And with Jordan, I think his big advantage is kind of what I was talking about a few minutes ago was he takes care of the basketball. And I mean, even going back to spring meetings when we talked to Mike White in May, I mean, he brought up how good. I think his assist to turnover ratio at St. Mary's was like 3-1. I mean, he takes care of the basketball, and I think that they've put a lot of value in that. But like you said, his shooting numbers aren't great. I mean, I see him when he's on the floor. He's going to be a guy that's more counted on to facilitate for some of these other guys, which I think is perfectly fine. Now, if Smurf Miller were to beat him for that job, I think they kind of want to turn Smurf loose and let him get his points too. If I had to predict right now, I think Jordan Ross will be the starting point guard, and that Smurf is a guy that comes off the bench and gives you a lot in that regard. But no, I think that when you look at what Mike White and what the staff has done in the past few years, they put a lot of value in bringing in guys, even if they weren't at SEC programs that won a lot, that made the NCAA tournament, that kind of have that winning experience. Again, you lost quite a bit from last year's team. I mean, looking at some of the numbers, only have 31.3% returning minutes from last year. 25.7% returning points. You take the guys who have proven they can win at this level, and even if it's not the SEC, even if Jordan Ross might have to adjust his style of play as far as how fast they try to go, I think they put a lot of value in a guy that has won at a pretty high level and trust that he can adjust and do well with the Bulldogs.
I'm detouring one more time from Kane, and we will get to him. But Smurf Melender, 15 points a game last year, 3 boards, 3 assists, almost 2 steals, and on 44% three-point shooting, both at his year at UTSA and as a freshman at South Alabama. That profile jumps out. So is he just this dynamic guard that can just fill it up from deep?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a guy that when he's on the floor, you better be ready because not only can he, hit shots, he can hit them from pretty much anywhere. I mean, when he committed to Georgia, I went back and watched some of his highlights, and he is not afraid to take a deep three, but he can hit them. And the thing I always try to keep in mind with a guy like that, the step up in competition is going to be pretty significant. But we have had a chance to talk to Smurf, and you can tell he's excited about the potential here. I think that they see. The guards they brought in are all transfer guards, and being able to count on these guys to go out and make plays. And, I think my biggest thing for him, I want to see how he handles, again, just taking care of the basketball, not putting the ball in harm's way, taking advantage of the guys that got around him. I think that the big thing when you look at this group as a whole, and Mike White has said as much, he thinks this team will shoot better than the team last year did, which, I mean, honestly, at times was a struggle, that they struggled sometimes just to get consistent scoring, getting stretches where I think about when they were at Tennessee, they led at halftime, and then the first 10 minutes, it was like of the second half, they just could not score, and Tennessee pulled away. They see that they have guys who can fill up the scoreboard, who can make plays, and again, even if Smurf, I think sometimes people are quick to see like, oh, let's say Smurf doesn't start. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think he's a guy that can come off the bench consistently, give you points, and probably bigger than anything, just spark an offense. If you get in a little bit of a rut, get Smurf out there and turn him loose.
Love it. Time to talk catching. So 17 minutes last year, 7 points a game, but I just have this distinct memory of I watched BYU beat Baylor at home in overtime. Had 23 points, didn't miss a shot from the floor. And I remember like the last 5 minutes regulation overtime, he didn't play. And like he's got it going. And because the coach had whatever prior beliefs about his ability to, hang in a moment like that. And he didn't, on his night, he didn't let him play. And then, he had a couple more games. That was like in January. And there were a couple games after that where he got in, scored in double figures, but he really just fell out of the rotation. And that's really frustrating when you're that talented. You're on a team that's NCAA tournament level good. And I was just kind of confused. I feel like they could have used him, but clearly Kevin Young had different plans. So I knew that he was out the door, and I knew he wanted to go somewhere where he'd have the ball. Frankly, he likes to put the ball on the floor. He likes to score. He can do a lot of other things, but he's kind of wired to score in that way. So tell me kind of the process of getting Kenny Catchings here, and the expectations for him this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Cannon's got a ton of potential, and you talked about that Baylor game. I asked Cannon, specifically about how well he shot that night, and he said, it was just one of those nights where everything I put up went in. And I asked Santo Surreal because we also talked to him the same day we talked to Cannon, and he basically said, you have to stay glued to Cannon if you're on defense because he can hit a shot from pretty much anywhere on the floor, and every year I go into a season with Georgia, I kind of circle one guy that I'm like, depending on how this guy plays, can kind of determine the ceiling of this Georgia team. And I think Cannon Catchings, if he has a big season, I mean, they can be a surprise contender. I mean, a guy that, go back to his high school. His time as a high schooler, there was a lot of talk that this guy's going to be a one and done. I think at one point he was committed to Purdue. He winds up at BYU, and he comes from a basketball family. I mean, his aunt, a very successful WNBA player. We asked him about just coming from a basketball family, and he said pretty much everything. Any disagreements at home they wound up being settled on the hoop out in the yard. So I think he's got a ton of potential. I'm fascinated to see what his role looks like, but I think they see him playing a significant role, understanding what he can bring to this team. I think there's untapped potential. And again, if you were to tell me to pick one player, that can determine how far this Georgia team go, for me, it's Cannon Catchings, his shooting ability. If he can lock in defensively, I think he's got a chance to be a very important part of this team and have a lot of say in how successful they are.
It's probably disrespectful that I haven't brought up Blue Kane yet. Coming back here for his junior year, 10 points a game last year. And I still feel like, that 34, 35% he's been hovering around from deep, I still feel like he's a much better shooter than that. What are expectations for him kind of getting into year 3 in this system? And is he a leader of this team? There's not really many. I know we'll get to Justin Bailey and Justin Abs in a second, but it's a younger team. So is a guy like that who's back, must be a really key piece.
Oh, for sure. And I think they look at him and Dylan James. Those are two of the guys that this is going to be their third year at Georgia. I mean, they are the veterans on this team. And, yeah, talking to some of the folks around the program just throughout this offseason, when I've checked in, like, who's impressing, who has done, what's asked and who's standing out. Blue's name was the one who kept coming up. I mean, I think they understand, especially with Silas gone now, that Blue is the guy they have to count on and that he's been through this. I mean, really, that's the biggest thing. He's kind of ridden the wave of ups and downs, and he talked about that from the NCAA tournament perspective last year, that, there's going to be times where things aren't going well, but you have to just keep grinding, and he's a cornerstone of the program right now, and yeah, I think if they can get a little bit more consistency out of him as far as specifically his 3-point shooting, because when he's on, I mean, go watch that Florida game they won. I mean, he was fantastic, and he winds up saving them at the very end of that game. Florida takes the lead late, and he hits, I'm pretty sure, a three in like the last minute, and kind of helps him stave off a late Gators rally. So no, I think Blue is one of the cornerstones of this program. They understand that he's been in these battles, he's been in these wars in the SEC. If they're going to contend again, if they're going to be an NCAA tournament team, they need Blue to be one of those consistent pieces, especially offensively, a guy they can rely on and count on, especially big moments. I think when you look at this team, you got to think the ball is going Blue Kane's way.
Dylan James, kind of both of his first 2 years, had this kind of like barbell looking box score where he falls. I don't know if he was hurt or if he just fell out of the rotation in the middle of the season. And then, Mike Waite definitely used him down the stretch. Is he a guy that's going to continue to hover around that 18-ish, 20 minutes a game, or do you think there's more in store for him here?
Really interested just because he's sort of, especially the last 2 years, kind of been a tweener for Georgia between playing guard and being a forward. And I think that he's just a guy, they call him Everyday Dill. They talk about how consistent he is. And I think figuring out what exactly his role is going to look like is interesting because to me, I see him being able to play the four along with Cannon and kind of handling it there with some of the smaller lineups Shorter's going to play with. But he's equally important. He's a guy that the more you watch this team, and if you kind of don't get buried in the box score, he does things that sometimes just don't show up in the box score, and Mike White's talked about that quite a bit. So even if he winds up not starting with how they've retooled this team, you're going to see a lot of Dylan James, and probably bigger than anything, he is one of the leaders in the team. Again, him and Blue now in their third year. I mean, they've gone through a lot. They were, played pretty important roles last year on that NCAA tournament team. They can kind of help hold the standard for a lot of these new guys. I think there's 8 new guys in total. Kind of show them the ropes and help them get ready for the season.
Samto Ciro, the other key returner. I remember just a few moments for sure last year where it just stood out to me that he's just so big, strong, and athletic at that size. And like the SEC had a lot of great bigs, teams like Florida. So some of these front courts were just so deep and so big and so physical, and he is just a monster down there. I only played 14 minutes a game last year. How much do you think he can kind of scale up? And when he's out of the game at the 5, looking at the roster, I'm not sure who that next guy up is. Is it a small ball look or is it one of these freshmen?
I'd watch probably Justin Abson behind him, the App State transfer. I imagine that he'll kind of be there with Somto. And yes, Somto's a guy, if I didn't pick Cannon catching, Somto would probably be the other pick as far as who you see and how far this team can go. And yeah, he showed a lot of potential. And I think a big thing that I want to watch this year, from what I've heard, he's really worked on his ball handling because last year it became very clear when he was on offense, if he had the ball, you really needed him to go up and try to dunk it because if he was kind of moving, it was very dangerous and teams took advantage and forced turnovers. But he's a guy that's gotten really lean. I think he said he's cut about 15 pounds this offseason. I think in large part in preparation because they are going to play faster. But, I think that Santo is going to be a starter on this team, a guy that, I went into the offseason wondering if Samto was going to be back just because of his potential and the potential to go into the portal and see what he could find, much like Silas did. But he stuck around. He talked about when we spoke to him this offseason how important loyalty was to him and wanting to stay there and continue to build on what George has done. So I think he's got real potential. Again, fascinated to see just what he looks like with what is supposed to be a faster tempo offense. And again, watching how he's grown offensively, and two, he's always been kind of an emotional guy. I mean, a guy that gets fired up, and he said he's really worked on kind of controlling his emotions a little bit more, which you want to see a guy that big, a guy that's in those fights, be passionate. But I think he's learned how to kind of channel that, and I think that's nothing but good news for Georgia.
Jake Wilkins and Kareem Stagg, these two 4 stars, top 70-ish guys, 6'8" and 6'9", respectively. Expectations for them to step in and be impact players right away.
Yeah, I'd say between them, I think Jake Wilkins is the guy that I would watch to maybe get more playing time. Kareem's had a little bit of a hand injury, it sounds like, but I think by the time we get to the start of the season, he'll be available. But yeah, Jake Wilkins, I mean, comes in with high expectations. He's wearing his dad's number 21 at Georgia. He's, talking to Mike White. Mike has made it clear that Jake understands that he can't come in and be his dad. He's his own guy, and he's got a lot of potential. Blue Kane said that they've had some battles out there on the wing this offseason, and Blue joked that Jake's got a little bit better hops than Blue Kane does. But I think there's a lot of potential. I think he's a guy. I think it's a good situation for Jake in that he doesn't have to be thrown into the fire day one. They do not have to have him as a starter, but his highlights in high school were very, very impressive. He's a guy that's got a ton of potential. I think that they want to let him learn. And I think he's a guy that will benefit from being around Blue Kane. I think he's got guys around him that can help him learn what it takes to play in the SEC. But from what I've heard, I think Georgia's really excited about his potential. I think you'll see him in the rotation and a guy that will get probably more minutes as this freshman year goes along.
We didn't touch on Justin Bailey coming over from Wofford or Jackson McVeigh, the 7'1" freshman. Any notes on those guys who could be a factor here?
Yeah, Justin Bailey's a guy that really is an impressive 3-point shooter. I think that he's part of a real emphasis for Georgia this offseason, a push to be a better 3-point shooting team. And I kind of look at him as the replacement for Dakota LaFew, who played there last year, the Mount St. Mary's transfer, who did a really good job coming off the bench. I'm expecting something very similar from Justin Bailey. Jackson McVeigh from Ellijay, Georgia. Not very far from where I grew up. I think he's a guy that you're probably not going to see very much as a freshman. I think that he's going to be more of a developmental guy. 7'1", another overtime elite guy. Georgia has done a very good job of tapping in to that pipeline and getting talent out of Atlanta there. So he's a guy that I would be surprised if we see him play much of a role. But again, you get a guy 7'1" in state, worth rolling the dice on, seeing what he can do as a freshman, and maybe he surprises some people. Maybe he does wind up becoming an option as we go through the season.
Bailey shot 46% from deep last year. That is quite impressive for a Wofford team that made the tournament. You said the kind of emphasis to look for guys who came from winning programs. Of course, Wilkinson didn't meet that. I forget how good UTSA was, but I definitely see that with some of the guys they brought in. So before I get you out of here, Jordan, any final, whether it's just a nugget you've heard from this summer or any stylistic change other than kind of playing faster, any flag plants of a guy that you think is going to sneak up on people? Any last thoughts you want to give me?
I'd say for folks to watch Santos Surreal, I think he's a guy that they're going to count on again, even if they're going with some smaller lineups than we've seen in the past. And again, Cannon Catchings is the guy that's sort of, for me, the barometer of this team. If it takes him a little while to get his feet under him, that might show up with how Georgia's playing. And it's just going to be fascinating for me to watch them once they get into SEC play. Their non-conference schedule is not really all that deep or difficult. I mean, they play Georgia Tech as they do every year. Then they got a game in December against Cincinnati and Atlanta. But maybe that is a good thing for a team with 8 new players and kind of get their feet under them during non-conference play. I think as competitive as the SEC was last year, I feel like a lot of it is so up in the air just with all the changes we've seen, a lot of upperclassmen moving on, some of the coaching changes, like with Bruce Pearl retiring at Auburn. There's opportunity at Georgia, but I think last year you saw it is very, very hard to win in this SEC. So fascinating just to see how this team comes together. I think making it back to the tournament is by no means a guarantee, but there's a lot up in the air in the conference right now. If Georgia can take advantage and try to get these guys shooting to their potential. I mean, if they shoot like Mike White thinks they can, I think they very well could go back to the tournament for the second straight year.
There you have it. Georgia Bulldogs. Thank you, Jordan, for joining.
Absolutely.